Disclaimer: if you are someone who is currently in the very heart of grief, if you've just recently lost someone that you love and you're still navigating this new definition of life without them, then maybe skip this episode. Also, I'm extremely, genuinely very sorry for your loss. I would like us to address a pretty morbid subject today, but let's see how unmorbid we can make it. I've personally found dark humor to be the solution to all of my day-to-day problems, and believe me, it does work. There is always something so absurd and preposterous for us to pause and appreciate in the middle of an otherwise very sad and painful situation. Like someone accidentally saying congratulations at a funeral instead of I'm sorry for your loss. I feel like we can train ourselves to pause and laugh at that. Or if one more thing goes wrong on an already stressful and imperfect day, I feel like we can find humor even in that, right? Making fun of our luck so that we can find just enough strength to push through to the next thing. Sometimes, but not always. But I've been thinking about something so much these past many months, and I'd like to believe that I have it in me to be lighthearted about it. So, here goes. Over the past many months, definitely over a year, I have been slapped into the ridiculous reality that we are all going to die. I know, I was also very, very shocked when I found out. But alas, it is true. We are all mortal little things strolling this earth like we own the place. But seriously, this generous reminder has been lurking around every single corner of my life for some reason, whether that is through world news of loved ones being diagnosed with stupid illnesses, or people I know who have actually beat us all to eternity. It is insane, and I feel infinitely unprepared always. But the more that I wrestle with this ridiculousness, the more that life teaches me to stop wrestling. You know, like the fact that I reject this reality does not make it any less real or applicable to me. I will never be the exception to death. So all I'm doing is wasting my time, my energy, and my valuable emotional capacity. So instead, I've been learning to consider how this crappy fact can impact my day-to-day. Positively, that is. How can living with a conscious awarenessness, dark humor has begun already. How can living with a conscious awareness of our finitude make our lives, our relationships, our conflicts so much richer? So, get yourself nice and cozy, and let's begin today's conversation. Hello, my darlings. How are you? So good to have you here for another episode of the Being Aloud podcast. And let me just say that today's episode and the topic for today, if you couldn't already tell by the introduction, what is wrong with me? What is wrong? Oh, let me take this. I'm taking my glasses off because the glare is just too much. But yeah, if you couldn't already tell by the introduction, I feel like this is such a big and very heavy conversation, and it's something that, needless to say, is relatable to all of us. Either we've already experienced the sting of pain after having lost someone we love. That could be a pet, that could be a person. But I'm talking specifically about death. I feel like this is something like the rest of many of the things that we talk about here on the podcast, is something that we all experience as human beings, but we never actually sit and talk about it because it's so painful. Because whether we're talking about loved ones passing away, or we're talking about the reality of the fact that we ourselves will one day also die, it's not a fun subject, But I have found, and anyone who knows me in person knows that, like, I find it very difficult to talk about difficult things with a serious face on. I feel like I always have to be introducing some kind of humor, some kind of sarcasm, because otherwise it's just all really too much, Like, real life is just too much. And so today I was like, why not address this very relatable, very applicable, very universal fact with a little bit of humor? Because I do feel like it's important for us to talk about it. And we don't have to, like, be in the heart of having lost someone. Having lost someone in order for us to have this conversation, right? We can see if there's any way we can prepare. But that's just the thing. I feel like no matter when this happens or how this happens, we will never be prepared. Ever. We will never have reached a point in our lives where we're like, I feel like now I'm prepared to lose my loved one, Like, now's the time. Yeah, like, if they can leave now, I will be fully happy, satisfied with the life that we actually had. All good, No, it just does not work that way. And if you think that way, then let me know so we can never ever be friends, because that's just weird. That's just super weird. Okay. We're never going to be prepared for death. Ever. And that scares me. Because I'm the type of person who really likes to be on top of things. I like to be in control to some degree. I'm not going to say I like to be in absolute full control over every detail of my life all the time. No, I'm actually a pretty, like, all over the place kind of a girl and a last minute kind of a girl and stuff like that. So I'm not like a type A, need to know everything, need to control everything type of person. But when it comes to things that hurt, anxiety makes me believe the lie that I can control things that I cannot control, right? But like I said in the introduction, this concept of death and the reality of death and the fact that literally it is everywhere around us. And people I love are suffering because they're losing people that they love. And so being who I am, I feel that to my core all the time. And then I try to, like, rationalize it. I try to wrestle with it. I try to understand, what does it mean? I try to understand, how life can just go on. There's so many questions related to death in general. But then the more that I see that, the more that I realize eventually this fact of life, this reality of the matter of being human, is also going to affect me one way or another. I mean, it's already affected me through losing my emotional support dog in the middle of my divorce, which was just horrific. I've lost grandparents. But I've lost friends actually too. Oh gosh, that was terrible. And the more that I think about that, the more that I'm terrified. And the more that you experience that, I feel like the more terrified you become, because now you know that this very deep, real pain exists, and you want to do everything and anything in your power to avoid ever experiencing it ever again. And it's just so sad and morbid. Anyway, so this is not the way I wanted the episode to go at all. The point I'm trying to make today is, okay, we know that death exists. Yeah, we know. So I have, like, popped the balloon, burst the bubble, address the elephant in the room. Now we know death happens. But instead of doing what I've been doing, which is overthinking, overanalyzing, allowing my anxiety to lead me to a very dark and disgusting place of, like, fear, instead of all of that, what if there was a way by which we could address this topic in a way that is healthy, in a way that is good for us, in a way that doesn't leave us paralyzed, in a way that is lighthearted enough that we can face every day, knowing that we have no idea how this day is going to end. Because otherwise, just the sentence is terrifying in and of itself. So unless I know, I don't know what I don't know, but here is the way I'm choosing to look at it, okay? In Arabic, we have, I've been hearing this also again very often recently, this idea of like, يلا كلها شوية وهنموت, which basically people say like whenever something happens that's like, oh man, we didn't think this would happen, we don't want this thing to happen, blah, blah, blah. We'll say like, well, it's only a matter of time before we die. And that kind of is meant to be a joke, but I have been thinking about it. إنه يلا كلها شوية وهنموت. It's only a matter of time before we all die. Can't that actually be a good way to live? Can't that actually be like a new lens through which we perceive things? Because really think about it. If you know you're gonna die, or if you're dealing with a person that you know is gonna die, wouldn't you change the way that you are slightly? What I mean by that is, let's say my sister and I are having this giant fight. However, I know the doctors have told me that I have been given 2 weeks to live. And so me and my sister in this moment are very frustrated. And this is not to devalidate or unvalidate whatever it is that's frustrating us. But we also know this fact. So we know that this thing is frustrating us, but we also know the fact that I've been given 2 weeks to live. I highly doubt that if we're fighting over who's going to wear this pair of shoes tonight, I doubt that this fight will take up space. I doubt that we will give it as much attention as if we didn't know that I had 2 weeks to live, right? And what I'm trying to say is we tend to make very big deals and say things that hurt people around us and do things that hurt people around us as though it's the end of the world. As though who wears this pair of shoes today, me or my sister, is the biggest issue in the world. And we let such a stupid thing, such a retarded, stupid, idiotic thing, create an environment of friction and tension between me and this person that I adore. And what if we lived our whole lives like this? Okay, now I know that this is not all the way practical, but I speak from experience when I say I know it is kind of practical. Because there was a certain period of time when in 2016, I lost a dear friend of mine. And for 1 month, I locked myself in a room and I literally could not get out. And I was paralyzed. And it was my first major loss of, someone that I genuinely cared for very, very deeply. And so I was so confused. I was like, what do I do with all of this pain and all of this grief? I have no idea what to do with it. And so I locked myself for 1 month in my room. But then eventually that month ended. And now I need to go and be out in the world. I need to see friends. I need to see family. I need to go to work. Life goes on. I'm still alive. And therefore, no matter how much I prolong having to face the real world, it had to happen eventually. And so I remember that shifted my thinking so much to where I would have conversations with people and I would disagree with them so much, but I would catch myself not letting it go to the maximum of where it could go because I'm like, life is too short. I don't want to waste my time. But like at the end of the day, even though you're frustrating me so much right now, I know I love you and therefore I don't want to waste my time fighting with you over something that in the big picture doesn't really matter. And I feel like out of that, I started to think of like, in a month's time, will this thing that I'm fighting with my friend over, will it still bother me this much? Will it affect me this much? Is it a part of my day-to-day thing? Is it going to be a big obstacle in my life? If the answer is no to any of the above, I learned to just not make a big deal. But then the pain of grief, we grow, the grief stays, and we continue missing these people, but we grow and we evolve, and then the pain doesn't sting as much. And so whatever lessons we learned, we kind of forget about them, which is why it's important for us to have conversations like the conversation that we're having today, because we don't need to wait until we're in the thick of things and learn things the hard way for us to maybe plant a seed of a new way of thinking in our brains, so that when real life happens, we have this tiny little seed that was once planted in our brains that we can go back to when life gets hard. You know what I mean? So that was why I wanted to do this. But understanding that it's only a matter of time before we all die should be something that's on our minds, not in a morbid way, but in kind of like a reality check kind of way of like, that changes everything. And I wrote a bunch of ways by which this can change, our everyday lives. First thing being that death gives us perspective and teaches us to think if things are really worth it. So when we walk around without this perspective, we let small things get to us in big ways. But if we understand that we are all going to die, then we understand that this too shall indeed pass. Then we understand that whatever it is that's bothering us so much, or irking us so much, or breaking us so much, isn't forever. And that helps us. And so what are some of the things that can be changed using this new perspective? First thing being fights or arguments with people that we love. Second thing being, the first one being fights, second one being arguments, where instead of like getting into every argument you're invited to, no, be very mindful about what arguments you're willing to enter, because not every argument is worth it and not every argument is fruitful. And so kindly and respectfully opt out of some arguments, because your time is so much more precious. And then I'll leave the judgment of the particular situations to you and your life and the, specificity of your particular conversation right now or whatever. But definitely no fights. And definitely I personally am telling myself would like choose what arguments I choose to enter. And then the third one is bad mouthing. Like, to let gossip or to let bad mouthing other people be or take up space in our conversations means we are wasting precious alive time, kind of ruining someone else's reputation, even if it's just in front of one other person, or even if it's in confidence. Like, this is such a difficult one. I've already said this before on the podcast, but like, what I say here is what advice I would give you, and it's the advice I would give myself. But I don't want, like, it's not like I'm there. It's not like I have this strength, because I know for a fact that there are people in my life that really frustrate me and have hurt me so much that whenever the name pops up in conversation, I can't help but talk about them in a bad-mouthing way. And I'm genuinely really trying to work on that for so many reasons. But for the purpose of today's episode, like, that's a waste of alive time. That is time we could be spending talking about things that grow us, things that encourage us, things that can push us and help us move forward and become better people. You know what I mean? So those are just 3 things that I thought about, things that I would consider differently. And it's all from this newfound respect for our time, understanding that we're not here forever. This situation is not here forever. And the people we're dealing with that we love, if we're wasting our time with them, arguing and fighting, we don't know what can happen. And it's not morbid. I mean, it can be morbid, but we are trying for that not to be morbid. We're trying for that to give us perspective so that we can live better and love better and respect better and take better accountability for our time. You know what I mean? It's not morbid. Please understand where I'm coming from, okay? But another thing that this does is that it humbles us, because knowing that nothing is forever and no one is forever kind of flattens us all to where we're at the same level. So it doesn't matter if this person is the CEO of a company and I'm the janitor and I clean the toilets. realizing that me, the janitor, and Bob, the CEO, we're both not gonna live forever, humbles us. And so if I'm Bob, the CEO, realizing that I'm gonna die and that the janitor is gonna die, gives me a new way of respecting this person because we're the same. We are made of the same stuff and we are destined to the same finish. And so that kind of like, it humbles us, and then it also helps us get our values and our principles back in check. Because now that I know that I'm gonna die and that this much poorer person or less fortunate person is also gonna die, how can I think that I'm better just because here on this earth I have this like very finite advantage over this other person? And I think that this way of thinking, actually, I think about it even in terms of like global affairs and world news and stuff, like all these leaders of the world and rulers who are literally only here for, let's say, 85 years while they're alive. And then they manage to cause so much pain and so much like generational trauma for peoples. Like, I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about peoples. When we're all gonna die. Like, we're all gonna die. And so on a bigger scale, that helps us think about that, but also on a smaller, everyday, interpersonal level, that's also something we should be thinking about. You know, this should humble us. It should help us love one another more. It should help us act from a place of like, I want my mark to be good because it matters. Because the words I say matter. Because the actions that I do matter. You know? So that's kind of something also that I thought about. And then with that comes just a desire to verbally and practically express love. If I know that the people that I love in my life aren't here forever, and I know that I am not here forever, then I'm going to want to hug the people all the time. I'm going to want to express how much I love them all the time. I'm going to want to compliment them when they look nice all the time, or when they've done something good all the time, because I don't know. And then the last thing I thought of was, this gives us like a deep compassion for people who are actually experiencing this pain right now, because it gives us a compassion even more so the more that we grow up and the more of this pain that we firsthand experience. Because when you've experienced pain, you can't unexperience pain. And so when you see other people experiencing pain, the compassion is there. And it's a very human thing. It's like saying, yeah, I see that you're in so much pain. I can feel it to a degree. And it sucks. It sucks that your humanity is being tested the way mine was tested, or the way mine will be tested. It sucks being human sometimes. It sucks being a person sometimes. But that's why community is so important. It's because we all have this shared humility. We all have this shared soil that we're all made of. And we can lift each other up when life gets hard. And we can be each other's tourniquets when we feel like we're bleeding out from the inside out, right? So this episode turned into something a lot more morbid than I expected and had planned. I was like, I'm going to think of this in a very hilarious way, you know? I'm going to make sure I make jokes every other sentence, and I'm going to be super sarcastic, you know? But I couldn't. But still, what I had to say should not be applied in a morbid way. Like, and I genuinely believe that we can think of this in a way that isn't morbid, not like, oh, I'm gonna give you hugs because you're gonna die, or because I'm gonna die, because I mean, Lord willing, we live long, happy, healthy lives, you know? But just thinking in this way doesn't only prepare us for the inevitable, but it also gives us perspective and hopefully changes our behavior to the better. Okay, so even though I said this wouldn't be a morbid conversation, it ended up kind of touching upon something that's hard. And again, it's because this topic is just so hard and we're not used to talking about it, But maybe having listened to like a 30-minute podcast episode can help you get the courage to face this big monster that nobody talks about, And hopefully you were in a good enough headspace where you can take something constructive out of today's episode instead of like just leave with crippling fear. The purpose is the opposite of fear. Actually, the purpose is for us to get courage, for us to get perspective, and for us to live well, because that is the purpose. That's the purpose of this podcast, is for us to live well individually and then in community. And part of that has to happen by us having difficult conversations and talking about things that maybe aren't always very fun to talk about, but it's just what makes us all human. We're all human. We're all in this. We all experience this. And you're not alone if you have experienced this in the past. You're not alone if you're in the middle of it now. You're not alone every single day. There is at least one person you can lean on and trust to feel you and love you and carry you through the difficulties. So please never forget that, and maybe live with better perspective and have our eyes set on bigger goals, Anyway, I hope I didn't bum you out too much today, but thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being supportive of the Being Aloud podcast. If you're on YouTube, thank you for watching and giving me your precious hours, your precious time. I hope it's worth it. As always, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You have no idea how much it helps. Please like and share, and then also leave your thoughts in the comments, and also maybe suggestions for topics you'd like us to talk about, or things you've been thinking about, or whatever it is. The comments are open for conversation. I have had amazing conversations over the past couple of weeks with people who have left their comments. And so, yeah, I look forward to reading your comments. I look forward to seeing you hitting that subscribe button. And as always, I'll see you again next time.